What's going on, everybody? I'm Patrick from POWLAX, and in this video we are going to be doing an overview and teaching the Wesleyan National Championship Zone. So for those of you who don't know, Wesleyan beat Salisbury in the Division III National Championship game by a score of 8-6. Now, Salisbury had an average goals per game of about 14 before heading into this game. They'd been kept to low numbers a couple times before, but seeing as how they only scored 6 goals, I thought that doing a video on this zone would be a great addition. So one of the things about the national championship game is that it wasn't just Wesleyan's defense that helped them win the game. They did do a great job on the defensive end, but they also won a ton of face-offs. They went up 4-0 in the first quarter, and they had way more offensive possession than Salisbury ended up having. I think Salisbury only had about 20 to 23 possessions in the entire game. So it definitely wasn't just the defense, but the defense was definitely a big part of their win. My goal with this video is to teach the Wesleyan 3-3 zone the way that they run it, and to really teach the team concepts as well as the individual concepts, so that not only will coaches understand how it's played as a team, but also all the individual intricacies that happen within the defense. Another one of my goals within this is that I really want to get rid of the idea that playing zone is just for people who are lazy. I definitely don't think that's the case, and as you watch Wesleyan play, you'll really see that they're not lazy whatsoever. They're moving, everyone's being a team player, and they really do a great job to show that zone just isn't a lazy defense. The final thing I'm going to say to wrap up this intro is that if you coach youth lacrosse, don't run zone. Yes, we know that you can run a zone and you can win more games. You can be more successful by running a zone. But from my standpoint, you really inhibit the development of players who don't already understand man-to-man principles. Now, if your team knows man-to-man principles, feel free to put in a zone. But if they don't, players need to be on the perimeter running, figuring out angles, learning how to break down, learning how to slide and recover, because most of those man-to-man principles are within this zone. They're just a little bit altered. So I'm not going to go entirely into that issue in this video. I've got a whole other series that I'm going to do where we'll talk about why youth teams shouldn't run zone. But for now, we'll just leave it at that. If you want to follow along on the playbook PDF, you can get that by hitting this link up in the corner and going to patreon.com/POWLAX. We recently changed up how things work on the Patreon, so this playbook PDF is no longer free. It's a part of the complete sets tier, which is $5. There are 2 other tiers you can do, which is $1 for all the drill PDFs, and then $3 from basically everything that's not just a drill, but also isn't a complete set. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to go over are just the zone basics. So the first thing you got to know is, what is a zone? So a zone defense is basically a style of defense where, rather than having players match up against individual players and then switch based on needing to slide and then recovering, they're actually just going to defend the players within a specific zone. And so it's very important that I make this distinction now. They don't necessarily have to stay in their specific zone. They have to defend the players within their zone and can go elsewhere if there's no one in their zone. I think it's a huge distinction that a lot of coaches don't make, and sometimes it confuses players. So there are a lot of different zones out there. There's a backer zone, there's a zone where you put poles on all of the corners and have shorties in the middle, and then there's the 3-3 zone, which is the one that Wesleyan runs. And the 3-3 zone is basically defined in 2 separate ways. The first is the 3-3. And the 3 is basically that there are 3 zones across the top and 3 zones kind of a little bit above GLE. And each zone is given a specific number. So 1 is top left, 2 is crease and up top, 3 is top right, 4 is back left, 5 is crease and X, 6 is back right. And so after we've categorized those zones into their specific numbers, now we have to define the zone based on where the short sticks are, and that's what the S's and L's are. So S is short stick, L is long pole. And the way Wesleyan runs it, their short sticks are in the 1 zone and the 3 zone. So this would be a 13-3-3 zone. Other teams tend to like to run it in different ways, where maybe they have a 25 zone or a 46 zone where the shorties are in different locations. For instance, the 46 zone you would run if you didn't think that their attackmen were very good and you kind of just wanted to put more pole pressure up top against some of their midfielders. That definitely is not what Wesleyan wanted to do. At 2 points during the Wesleyan-Salisbury game, one of the short sticks had to defend this 6 location right here. One time it was planned and they really got burned. The other time it was after a failed clear. But so let's watch those 2 clips now. So in this first clip, you're going to see what happened after a failed clear. The Salisbury team picks it up, they come in, and because they had just failed to clear, a short stick gets to the ball first in the 6 zone. And so right as he gets to this zone, once he realizes that people are behind him, he gets back to his zone. So that was a good example. Now for the bad example, in this situation, I'm pretty sure that they were trying to keep a pull on this midfielder here. And so as the short stick in the 6 couldn't really get hands on the attackman, he found a great skip pass, which turned into a goal. So now that we understand exactly what the positions are, where our shorties are, I want to show you an image that we used in the PDF that really shows you exactly how far each zone extends. And so as you can see here, each zone has its own color, which makes it very easy to see how far the zones go. Notice that all of the zones go out almost to the restraining line, and that each zone overlaps other zones pretty significantly. And that's because as a player is drawn from one side of their zone to the other and then the ball is thrown back, we need to make sure that that player knows that he can actively go into another zone if we need that to happen. So a lot of times I just see it drawn with, small little circles like that's his zone, that's his zone, that's his zone, and I really just wanted to make sure that I got away from that here. Another thing about zones that I definitely want to clarify is that you can definitely pressure with zones. I'm not really sure exactly why people think you can't, but you definitely can, especially with a team that really moves the ball but doesn't move much. You can absolutely extend out, and it can be very useful to press out in a zone, as Wesleyan did a couple times in this game. Watch how extended the two poles get as one goes to play the ball at X and the other plays the ball on the wing. If a team is just swinging the ball, each zone can definitely anticipate the passes, get out to pressure the ball. So why would a team choose to run a zone? There are a bunch of different reasons, and we're going to go through them very, very quickly. First is obviously to protect the middle of the field, the crease area, our house. And that is why all of these zones are positioned right in the middle of the field, right above the goal. The next is going to be to slow down the tempo of the game, because as we have all of these players inside, a lot of offenses are going to have to move the ball around the outside. And because there's almost less moving parts, even though we're going to move a lot, it can really slow down an offense. The next thing that it can definitely do is limit your fouls. Because we don't have poles chasing players all over the field, and a lot of times if a player is carrying the ball for a long period of time, they're going to end up getting 2 separate players. There's not a lot of time for players to really throw big checks and get penalties. The most likely penalty that you'll get is probably a cross check if someone tried to throw the ball inside and then he got hit by a player inside. But so it can definitely limit your fouling. Some coaches like to use zones just in specific situations, like maybe at the end of a quarter if the other coach calls timeout in the offensive end, you can throw in a zone here and there just to kind of mess with the other team. The final one, and this is one that definitely is correct, but I don't like because of how some coaches use it, it's that if your players are less athletic than the other team. And so the way that I see this used most often is if a coach gets a player who is, much bigger kid, very slow, and because he has a slow player and he knows he has to play him, he decides to put that big player right in on the crease, and he kind of tells him just to slide. And that drives me absolutely crazy, because for players who are bigger, who are slower, the most important thing you can make them do is have to be on the perimeter defending the ball. Because for someone who's larger, who might be slower, they have to learn how to cut off angles, how far they can actually come out to be successful. And it just really limits some of the players who are less athletic because they just get thrown inside into a zone. The last thing I want to discuss before we get into principles is how do teams usually try to attack it. So some teams will use a lot of set plays where they've got a lot of movement and picks, but one of the steadfast ways that teams try to attack it is basically by trying to step into gaps, draw 2 players, and then move the ball from one gap to another. So if a player's here and 3S goes to play him, he's now kind of out of his zone, so they'll throw it back across his zone, which forces 6L to rotate, and then they'll try and come in here. So basically, they try to step into gaps. And so the basic idea here is we want our zone to rotate faster than their ball movement. The other way is that they can cut backside, which is why we'll go over a lot of ways to stop cutters. Now what we're going to do is we are going to outline some of the principles of our zone defense before we get into the skills. The first principle that we're going to discuss is defend the dangerous. And what that basically means is that players are going to have to make decisions while they're on the field about who they need to defend, and they want to pick the most dangerous player. So Danger is defined by 3 basic categories. Number 1 is, do they have the ball? Obviously, we want to stop the ball. 2 is, what is their proximity to the goal? How far away are they? Are they standing right on the crease? 3 is, are they being defended by another player? And so once we have all of those, now we can make decisions based on who we want to play. So for instance here, let's say we've got A3 in the corner here with the ball, A2 right here, and he's actually kind of going to cut inside here, and M1. So if we're in a pressure set, we would probably have 6L actively go play A3. And if we're not in it, he might just kind of go halfway. But the main point here is he's got the ball, and we don't actually have to pick him up because he is behind the goal and he's pretty far out. But so we may actually want to stay inside here to defend A2, but here's what we can do. If 3S bumps down to defend A2 because he's closer to the goal than M1, that can work very well and allow us to kind of extend out. So 6L could choose to come all the way out to play A3 because even though A2 is in a more dangerous spot, he doesn't have the ball and he's being defended by 3S. Now, if the ball starts to move, all of that will obviously change, but I think that gives you a decent idea of how players are going to want to defend the dangerous. One of the things that includes is how we're going to slow play, but we'll go over that a little bit later. The next principle that we have I call R.A.C.E, and it's basically just an acronym that I made up while watching them play because I realized that all of their players were doing these things. I don't know if they actually use it, but it makes sense in my head, and so I'm going to share it with you guys. The first is that they have to read the field. Not only their zone, they need to read basically the entire field, their zone and anyone else's zone that is around them. The next is that they have to anticipate where they may need to go next. So if a player is carrying into their zone, they may need to know, okay, now I've got to go out and play him. If someone's cutting through, they need to anticipate where he's going next, etc., etc. Next is communicate, and players in all defenses all the time have to communicate a ton, and we'll go over some of the communication that they will be using. The third is expect, and this is the one that really helped me really grasp kind of what they were doing, because as they were playing in the national championship game, they never hesitated once, where as I've ran zone in the past, we had guys who would hesitate whether or not they would need to go help in a specific zone strictly because they didn't expect to have help behind them. So anytime a player is pulled out of their zone, they need to expect that they're going to have help so that they don't hesitate and give up a good shooting opportunity. Our next principle is a bungee cord. And so if you can imagine that basically near the center of the field in each of these zones, there is a stake that has a bungee cord that attaches to the stake and then to the player. And so as this player moves about his zone, if he ever gets pulled too far out, it's going to pull him right back in. So if a player gets carried to one side of his zone, once the other player calls pass, now he needs to bungee back to his zone. And when he bungees back, he needs to go inside to the middle of the field first, and then he needs to match up inside out, just like we would do in our man-to-man defense. The next principle is rotate, help, recover. We need to rotate to the next zone. If he gets pulled out of his zone, we need to help backside. And once the threat is eliminated, we need to recover back into our zone. The final principle that we have is 80% zone, 20% man. And the reason why I included that is because some teams like to run overload plays where basically they'll get 5 of their offensive players on this half of the field and we'll only have 4 of our defensive players, and so they'll overload the field. And at that point, if either 1S or 4L doesn't have a player in their zone, they need to get over and almost abandon the zone principles for that little bit so that they can cover the overload on that side. Now we're going to watch a couple of videos where we discuss these principles in action. In this clip, we're going to focus on the player in the 2 spot and talk about defending the dangerous. Watch how right now he's sloughed in, he's defending the player on the crease, but once he moves to X and is no longer dangerous, he gets back to his zone and ends up picking off a pass. Definitely a great play. In this clip, watch how all of the players are consistently reading the field, anticipating where they may need to go next, and they absolutely never hesitate because they always expect to have help behind them. In this clip, I want you to focus on how after the ball leaves any zone, the players are always bungeeing back. The 4 is out playing the ball moves, he bungees right back. Now watch the 3. As the carry goes to the 2, he gets the pass, and now he bungees right back to his zone. This is a clip that we're also going to see a little bit later where 2 players are basically picking inside. And as they pick and slip, there's no one in the 1 zone. So the 1 ends up chasing the player on the crease all the way through the defense, eliminating his zone principles for a second and chasing a player onto the opposite side of the field. He's a little late here and they get off a good shot. The first skill that we're going to cover is one that is used in every single defense, and that is keeping your head on a swivel. I know most of you already know this already, but just to cover it, keeping your head on a swivel basically means that while you're playing defense off ball, you have to be able to see the player who is in your zone and the player in the ball. In man-to-man defenses, it's see your player, see the ball. So there are 2 strategies we're going to use to do that. The first is V to C. And I picked up V to C from Jamie Calhoun at Cherokee Trail. And what up, Jamie? And so V to C basically means if I'm an adjacent player, let's say I am 1S or 6L, I want to basically almost put my arms in a V shape, pointing at the man in my zone and pointing at the man with the ball. So if 6L does this, his arms would go out this way and this way. And this is his vision angle. So he's going to sit there and he's going to check the man, check the ball. And for the most part, a lot of coaches say you should watch man for 2 seconds, ball for 1 second. Obviously, you're going to be listening in to the goalie as well to hear if it moves. So same thing with 1S. He's going to V to C so that he can see the ball, see his man. Now the second strategy is sideways, and basically it's the exact same as V to C, but sometimes when you're on the backside of a defense like 4L, this angle is going to get completely extreme. And so since it's such an obtuse angle, it basically means that in order to see both players, you're going to have to get completely sideways in order to see your man and the ball. In this freeze frame, I want you to focus on how the players are positioning their bodies. The 1 has his V to C. He's looking to the player on the wing now, but he could see the ball. The 2 is just on ball, so he's broken down playing the ball. The 3 almost has his V to see the guy on the opposite wing, but right now it looks like the ball is going to be thrown over to the left wing, so he's just kind of turned inside. The 4 and the 6 are both sideways. Notice how the 4 is looking at the ball and then anticipating the ball being thrown to the wing. The 6 is also sideways. He can definitely see the ball. He can definitely see X. And the 5 is inside, just covering up a player on the crease, and because they're in basically a straight line, he's pointed straight through his man, looking at the ball carrier. The next set of skills that we're going to define are sticks up, bungee, and breakdown. As players are in the defensive half of the field, especially if they're off ball, they need to have their sticks up in passing lanes to prevent skip passes. So within our example, we're going to have M3 skip the ball through to M1, and we hope here that 2L has his stick up in the passing lane and it doesn't get through. The reason we don't want to allow any skip passes is because as all of our attention is over here and the ball gets skipped over, everybody has to move over, which allows a lot of space as we are moving from one side to the other. Check out this video of a skip pass that absolutely torches Wesleyan in the Salisbury game. Watch how as the ball is skipped through, the 1 gets out to it first. The 2 doesn't communicate with him and he stays with the ball. Then a player pops off the crease, catches the throwback, and scores. What we wish would have happened is that either the 2 would have communicated that he was going to pass so the 1 could get back to that player, or we wish that the 2 would have just gone to pick up in the 1 spot. The skip in this play doesn't immediately cause the goal, but watch how the skip changes the dynamics of the field. Everyone's attention is up top, the ball is passed down, everyone starts to shift down, and that leaves my boy Josh Melton open inside for an easy quick stick finish. The next skill we're going to cover is bungee, and like we discussed with the bungee cord idea, once a threat in a specific zone is over, players need to bungee back into their zone. So 3S is kind of on the edge of his zone here. Once this ball moves, he has to bungee back. Finally, for this little picture, we have breakdown. So as 1S is moving out to take the ball, he needs to make sure he breaks down. And so breaking down is basically slowing your momentum and being able to react to a dodger. Especially at the lower levels, players don't understand how to break down and they try to run out and hit the offensive player. that player makes a tiny move and they go right past them. So what we want players to do is slow down so that they can actually react to what the offensive player is doing. A lot of coaches like to call the footwork big, big, little, little, where they take almost big step, little step, little step. Now they are able to react to what the offensive player is doing. Another great tip for this, if you're coaching young players, is to tell players break down to run with. Because a lot of players think they're just going to go out and hit that player, but if they start hearing, I want to run with this player, that will help them a lot. In this clip, watch how every time any player approaches the ball, they are always breaking down. It doesn't matter whether it's on the perimeter, if they have to rotate, every single one of them is going to slow down and be able to react to the offensive player by breaking down. So the next two skills that we are going to cover are very interrelated, and they are get big and slow play. Basically, the idea of get big is that as players are in their zones and the offensive players are moving towards them, they want to discourage dodging into their zones. They need to get big and almost be like, don't come in here or you'll get hit. And if they do come in there, you got to hit them. So let's look at our example. So we're going to have M2 do a little sweep here. M1 is going to fade. M3 is going to float. And so as this happens, we haven't covered this yet, but once 3S gets out to the edge of his zone, 2L is going to come up and he's going to say pass to 3S, and 3S is going to bungee back into his zone. Now, if M2 continues to come this way, we want to make sure that 1S gets big right here so that M2 doesn't want to come into his zone. In this clip, we're going to watch the two defensemen. Watch how as players are dodging toward his zone, he's getting big. He eventually passes in both of these situations, but the main concern we have is we don't want players dodging to the middle of the field. See how he steps up, gets big, and deters the dodge to the middle of the field. The next skill is a slow play. So if we continue this diagram and we have M2 continue to drive this way, and let's say that he draws 1S and 1S has to actually slide. And then M2 decides to pass the ball to M1. 4L is now in a pretty curious situation because he knows that 1S is out of his zone, so he knows he has to rotate, but he also has A1 right here. And so what he wants to do is he wants to slow play. At this point, M1's not dangerous. He's about 17 yards out. And so what 4L wants to do is he kind of wants to step up into space, he wants to get big, and he kind of wants to deter M1 from coming in so that 1S can recover and get back to M1. And so the big thing about slow playing is that you don't want to hesitate, but you don't want to just rotate out of control either. And so one of the things that could happen within this set is if 5L decides, hey, I'm going to help you, if 5L comes down, now 4L can absolutely go. But so the ability to not rotate out to players who are not dangerous, kind of stay inside and defend another player inside, is something that will be absolutely crucial to a lot of defenses. As we're talking about slow playing and not hesitating, we want the offense to be the ones who hesitate. So if there's any point in time where a player thinks he probably should go, just have him go. Whoever's in the next zone should rotate to fill for him, but we definitely don't want players who are scared to rotate. We'd rather have them rotate to someone who's not quite dangerous yet than we would to not rotate at all and have M1 just step in and take a step down from 12 yards. Now we're going to watch a video of some great slow plays in the Wesleyan game. In this clip, watch how as the 3 gets pulled to the top of his zone, and the 6 could rotate, he doesn't rotate too quickly. He kind of sits in his spot and forces the pass back to X and then bungees back to try to recover to the ball. In this clip, the 3 is going to get pulled to the top of his zone in just a second, and then watch how the 6 kind of slow plays the pass to the wing. Now we're going to talk about communication, and the first thing of communication that we have to get through is just our very, very basic communication. Anytime a player is taking the ball, he needs to yell out, ball. Very simple. We also want players to announce exactly where they are going to help the ball. And so for that, we have our left and our right because we are sliding adjacent within our 3-3 zone. So the left of the ball, which is 3S, is going to be 2L. So he's going to yell left. Now, in a man-to-man defense, he's probably hot and 1S is probably left. So it's a little bit different. Now on the right side, we've got 6L, and he's going to yell right. So a lot of players think that they're just yelling right and left to let people know where they are, But the real key to communicating efficiently is that these players have to embrace what that means. What it actually means is, I've got your right, I can help you if he comes to your right. Or I got your left, I'm going to help you if he comes to your left. And that's going to be absolutely crucial when we get into the next part of communication, which is a pass. And so let's say we've got 3S, he's on ball, and M2 is going to carry to the middle of the field. And as he does that, 3S is going to defend him until he reaches the end of his zone. At the end of his zone, 2L should have anticipated that he was going to need to pop out, and now 2L is going to come out to play the ball. As he comes out, he's going to yell pass. Pass basically means that he now has the threat, and 3S can bungee back into his zone. So whenever we want to pass players from one zone to the other, it's always the player that is in the zone the player is running to that we'll call the pass. They have a better angle on the play, they can see the play, and they know if they can actually pick them up. If the player on ball decides to call pass because he just thinks that it's coming, there might not be anyone there to help him, and so that might give up a goal. So we definitely don't want to do that. The next piece of communication that we are going to use is rotate, and this is basically what anybody says if they have to rotate from one zone to another in order to help. So let's take this play we have here. M2 is carrying across, 3S is getting to probably the very edge of the 3 zone, and so we are going to have M3 float off the crease, and as 3S is getting to the edge of that zone, M2 is going to pass back to M3. At this point, 6L has to rotate. And so as he rotates, he's going to yell, rotate. This is going to definitely let 5L know that if the pass goes one more, he may have to rotate too. But so whether it's calling your passes or calling your rotations, at some point, because it's zone, it's going to get a bit automatic. But players have to continue communicating no matter what, even if they get as good as Wesleyan or the best zone teams in the country. The final piece of communication that we are going to talk about is calling cutters and announcing picks. So within our play here, what's going to happen is we're going to have A3 pass up to A2. A2 is going to pass up to M3. And so with that, 6L is going to go play here. 3S is going to go play here, and 5L is going to bungee back. But we're going to act like it went really fast, and so 5L is still back at X. And so this is a play that we're actually going to see them run where Salisbury actually scores on it. But so what Salisbury is going to do is they're going to overload this side of the field by having M2 pick right here, and A1 is going to cut all the way from this side all the way around, and he's going to accept a feed from M3, and then he's going to shoot and score. So within this, we want to make sure that 4L1 sees this cutter and that he announces the cutter to 2L so 2L can get through the pick and stay with A1. Now, as this play runs, I know that a lot of time what Salisbury will do is they will pick here and they'll actually slip inside. That actually worked at one point during the game too. Check that out here. Watch these two players. See how we have a pick with the inside player picking for the outside player, but then as he comes off the pick, the slip is absolutely wide open. Good save by the keeper. But the main thing that we want to talk about on the defensive end is these two communicating. So as 4L sees A1 cutting, he needs to yell cutter, 2L, cutter. And by 2L, I mean he needs to use the name. This should alert 2L that a cutter is coming and that he needs to actively get out to play the ball. Now, in the actual clip, he does do a good job of doing this. Now, 4L needs to do a good job of actually getting inside because there's no one in his zone. He actually needs to get all the way inside, and he needs to pick up M2 so that 2L can go. In the clip, you'll see that he doesn't actually do that. He doesn't say, hey, you can go, I'm going to defend your guy, and so they're just a tad bit late, and Salisbury scores. As we start to play, keep an eye on the two defensemen. Watch how as the ball is swinging up the side of the field, he does recognize that the pick is there and that there's a cut, but he still thinks that he may have to defend the player who is picking. If the 4 would have taken the player on the crease and communicated to the 2 that he was okay to leave and go play the player who was cutting, no shot would have come of this play. Now we're going to talk about playing the ball at X. And the bottom line is we always want to play the ball at X. We can't let someone sit back here and just look through our zone and try to pick it apart. even if you think that because you have 6 up top and they have 5 that nothing will open up, I guarantee you that it will. With double cuts, picks, tons of different strategies that we can use to attack a zone. So you have to play the ball at X. So for the most part, if the ball is directly back at X, we want to have 5L go play it. So if A3 passes the ball here, 5L will go back and play it. This is the exact same way that it's going to work if we have a restart that is at X. If it's in the middle, 5L will take it. If it's in one of the corners, 4L or 6L will take it. Now, if there's 2 players playing behind, now we'll most likely just use the players who are at the sides. And so let's say the ball is just passed down here to A3, 6L will go play it. Then it's passed to A2, 4L will go play it, so that we can keep 5L inside to cover A1 and 2L can cover M2. Now, just because we want those players to cover at X doesn't mean that they always will, especially if we have to help. So if M3 decides he's going to dodge down the alley and he draws 6L, 6L is going to call pass, he's going to pick up the ball, and let's say he passes the ball right now. So that means now that 5L is going to come out to play the ball. And if the ball moves again, 4L will move out to play the ball here. Now, as this first pass happens, we want to make sure that 2L, because A1 is more dangerous than M2, that he is sloughed in and he can pick up A1 on the crease. But so we definitely want to play the ball at X, but we need to make sure that we are rotating efficiently. In this play, the 6 gets pulled out and the ball gets passed to X. The 5 goes to play him, and then now the 4 is going to get out to play the second player who moved to X. It was a good rotation. So now we're going to talk about hang-ups. And a hang-up is basically where an offensive player is behind the goal with the ball, but no one is playing them. In this situation, what we want to have happen is we want to have 5L go back to play him. Now, in the game, what happened was 6L thought that there was trouble inside, so he directed 5L to stay, and so 6L decided to rotate. And as he rotated, it caused a very easy rotation in the defense, where 3S came down to play A3, and then M3 stepped in and cranked a shot. Now, 2L was rotating. He was a little bit late, but they got a really great shot off strictly because their communication was a little bit wrong, and they rotated down from the 6 rather than the 5. As the ball is passed, the defenders get hung up. Watch right here as the 6 tells the 5, hey, you stay inside. Then as the 6 kind of shows to him and then decides to go, he actually causes a rotation where the 3 goes to the wing, and that leaves a lot of space for the step down up top because the 2 was a little late on his rotation. The final thing we're going to talk about when we are playing the ball at X is that we're never going to pass a player off from one zone to the other through X. We're just going to stay with them and end up switching zones. And so we're okay with this because all 3 of these players in the bottom of the zone understand all of the principles, and they're all long sticks. We definitely don't want to switch short sticks to be down here, and we'll see why in just a minute. But so let's say A1 passes down to A2 and 5L goes out to play the ball. As he goes out to play the ball and A2 carries across, we do not want to have him bungee back and have 6L come out to play him, because say as that happens, A3 is going to cut the middle. He has a little bit of time right here where he can feed the ball up through to A3. So we definitely don't want to pass. What we'd like for them to do is just switch. So as 5L goes out to play, he gets pulled across X. 6L is reading the cut and staying with A3 as he goes through. And then let's say M3 comes down to accept the ball, gets a pass. At this point, 5L is going to return inside and 6L is going to take the 5 spot. Now, for the most part, our players are going to play in the same zones for most of the time, so we're going to eventually want them to get back when they can, but they can definitely switch for a little bit of time until they can get into their natural positions. So here we have a little carry up the field and the float off of the crease. Pass back draws the 4 over, pass draws the 5 to X. The attackman carries the 5 across goal, and now watch as the ball is passed back. The 5 takes the 6, and the 6 takes the 5 position, and now they just continue to play. Now we're going to show you exactly how this zone works against teams who kind of press into the gaps and try to attack the backside of each zone. And so the 3 things that we're going to do is we're going to rotate, we're going to help, and we're going to recover. So in our play, what the offense is going to do is M3 is going to carry kind of into this gap, and he's going to draw both of them. M2 is going to fade down the wing, M1 is going to follow because we're kind of going to overload this side, and then A3 is going to do kind of a little C cut inside. Then A2 is going to sneak here, and A1 is also going to sneak there. So let's walk through what the defense should do. So the first thing is 2L is on ball. When he gets to the end of his zone, 3S is kind of going to follow this fade a little bit, but once M3 carries too far, he's going to yell pass, and he is going to tell 2L to pass. As that happens, M3 passes down to M2, and 6L has to rotate, where he will say rotate. Then, as M2 passes down to A2, 5L has to rotate. And so this is where we have our rotate. We've done a good rotation, and now we have to help. And so what I mean by help is that we have to help backside. So 1S and 4L have to come to the center of the field to the extent of their zone in order to help. Because if they stay outside, now we have A2 with the ball right here, A3 inside, and A1 on the back pipe, where the only person who's really splitting both of them is 4L. So if 1S doesn't help inside a lot and doesn't kind of get to A3, they're definitely going to have an open shot, and that's definitely not what we want. So if our backside helps enough where they don't have these options, now we're going to talk about our recover. And so within this, each recovery is going to happen once the ball moves from the zone. So as M3 carries over and he moves the ball, right as he moves the ball, 2L is going to bungee back, recover inside, and he may be able to pick this up too. The question is our recovery faster than their ball movement? So then, once the ball is passed from M3 to M2, 3S is also going to try to recover. And if he can get back to M2 with a slow play here, that's absolutely great. But so for here, 6L has to rotate. Once M2 passes, 6L will immediately bungee back, try to recover. And then now, if we've covered this all up, odds are A2 is either going to pull the ball out, maybe he will move it back to A1, and at this point, 4L, who is helping inside, will now go out and pick up the ball, and 5L will recover back. So that's the basics of how this zone defense works. We want to rotate, we want to help, and we want to recover. The quicker that we can do that, the better chance that we have moved our rotation faster than their ball movement. In this clip, we have a pass to X and pass back to the wing, then a pass up top. And this isolates the 3 and the 6 on the wing, then the 1 and the 2 up top, which forces the 4 to come out of his zone to rotate to the 1 zone. Watch how after the threat is gone in all of the zones, all of the players are getting back in to help so that everybody can recover. This is a great example of how rotating and zones can force outside shots. In this clip, I want you to see how hard it actually is to pull these players out of their zones. As this player carries up the wing, the 2 steps out to play him, which you think should force a rotation. But the 3 plays in the 3 zone, the 6 plays in the 6 zone, and as the player carries down the wing, the 5 steps out to X to play him, and when the ball moves to the 4 zone, the 4 takes it. Finally, we're going to go over some tricky things that an offense can do in order to beat a zone. And the first is a 1-4-1 set. And the reason a 1-4-1 set is pretty tricky is because some zones don't have any players in them. And when they start doing their carries and step-offs, it's going to become a lot tougher to distinguish who should go out and play the ball because we have players who are in the gaps between the 3-6 zone and the 1-4 zone. So just to kind of illustrate my point, I'll show you what we mean. So let's say the ball's up top with M2, 4L and 6L have nobody in their zone. But so basically what they want to do is they want to spider as far into the middle as they possibly can and be in the centermost portion of their zone. Now, as the ball moves to M1, let's say M1 decides to just carry down just a little bit. At this point, using our rules, 4L has to go out and play him, yelling pass, and then telling S1 basically to bungee back and recover in. At this point, 1S doesn't have anybody in his zone. So this causes 2 players to go to the ball and basically gives us a 5-on-4 backside. So in order to beat sets like a 1-4-1, players really have to communicate well, and they have to be aware of players who are stepping off. If you want to learn a little more about how the 14 carry step-off offense works, basically where this player will carry down, he'll step off the crease, and they're trying to push these 2-on-1s in all these spots, you can do that by clicking this link here. I made a video on it a little while back. So 14 carry step off is a man up, and a lot of these man up plays are going to work against a zone. Now we're going to see Salisbury's 14 carry step off in action. See right now as they are in a 1-4-1 with high wings, 2 players on the crease, a player at X, and a player up top. Now as this offense flows, notice how players are cutting the middle, they're popping off the crease. Now we're back into our 1-4-1. As the ball continues to move, we've got more step offs, more cuts, back into our 1-4-1. And so as this motion moves, players stepping off the crease, coming back onto the crease can really confuse a defense. Finally, the other thing that offenses will do is they will give you overloads and use picks. And so we saw this a little bit before, but this is actually from a 1-4-1 set where we had some carry step off action, and we're going to see this live in just a minute. But so basically the ball starts here at X, the ball is passed up, and as the ball is being passed up, we get a pick here from M2, and A1 comes all the way through and cuts off of it. M2 can have his slip as well. But so as this is happening, just remember, 80% zone, 20% man. 4L has to announce the cutter, and that should allow 2L to go play the player who is coming off of the pick, and 4L will pick up the guy who is slipping or rolling. They don't do it quite fast enough in the video, and M3 ends up feeding A1, and they score a nice little goal. But so it's just very important that you understand that at some point, if you're running a zone, a team may decide to try to throw an overload at you, and players need to understand that they can come across the field if there's no one in their zone. As we start to play, keep an eye on the 2 defensemen. Watch how as the ball is swinging up the side of the field, he does recognize that the pick is there and that there's a cut, but he still thinks that he may have to defend the player who is picking. If the 4 would have taken the player on the crease and communicated to the 2 that he was okay to leave and go play the player who was cutting, no shot would have come of this play. Thank you for taking the time to watch this entire video. I know that it was long. I had to film it 2 times. So the first one was 35 minutes long. We'll see how long this one turns out to be. So I really hope that you enjoyed it. Definitely let me know if you have any comments or criticisms. Leave those down in the comment section. I definitely appreciate all of the feedback that I've received in the past and will continue to receive. If you enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button and subscribe. And if you want to download the playbook PDF of the Wesleyan Zone, you can do that at patreon.com/POWLAX or by clicking this link here. And once again, all of the PDFs are no longer free. You have to pick a tier. This will be in the $5 tier, which includes all of the complete set offense videos and complete set defense videos and PDFs. Have a good one. I'll see you guys in the next video.